Okay, this is Jack Hopkins, and I'm going to keep this one relatively short. But I wanted to speak about something that has been all over the news this afternoon, and that is Joe Rogan coming out and speaking out the deportation policies of Donald Trump. And not just the deportation policy as a whole. He narrowed down to the specific spot of Garcia and what it means to skip due process. Now, look, I posted earlier on social media. I said we can only hope and pray that Donald Trump will lash out in a wicked kind of way on social media, on Truth Social, if that's still a thing, on whatever social media platform or statement that he makes that somebody else posts for him on Twitter or wherever it is. I hope he goes after Rogan specifically by name, maybe even gives him one of his infamous nicknames, negative connotation nickname, and really goes after Rogan. And here's why. Rogan played an instrumental role in the 2024 election. No doubt about it. Donald Trump is under the impression that he made Joe Rogan, and then Joe Rogan supported him. That's not the case. Without Joe Rogan, Donald Trump would never have won the 2024 election, and I don't think there are very many people who would argue that. Joe Rogan, in terms of the election, Joe Rogan made Donald Trump. And I said in this social media post, we can only hope and pray he goes after Joe Rogan, because mark my words, if he does, that will seal his fate. That will seal his fate. Now you may be thinking, how's going after Joe Rogan going to seal his fate? And it goes like this. When the MAGA GOP, or when Republican Congress, when Congress does what it should have done a long time ago, and I'm still holding out that they will, because things are changing quickly, it will be because of the massive pressure from their constituents is going to come because somebody amps and ramps them up. Somebody like Joe Rogan. Somebody like Joe Rogan, who has millions of followers, supporters, subscribers, who watch and listen and hang on to his every word. And he can tilt the scales with one single podcast episode. In fact, I would argue he can tilt the scales with one single comment within one single podcast episode. Now, I think Donald Trump knows that. I don't think Donald Trump would ever admit that. And I think Donald Trump would most certainly act against his best interest and behave exactly like that's not true, or that even if he knew, he didn't care. But I don't think he'll be able to help himself in going after Joe Rogan. And that is a good thing for this country. It's a good thing for you. It's a good thing for me, because Joe Rogan, being the massive influencer that he is, can change everything. Now, the protest, they are looking wonderful and getting all kinds of media coverage, and that's fantastic. It's more difficult, however, to translate those massive protests into a person, into a face, into an individual calling you up or looking you eye to eye and telling you to get off your ass and do something about this autocrat if you're a Republican politician. There's something about having Joe Rogan's face right up on the screen, one man, one individual, emphatically expressing his beliefs with passion and fire, and knowing that there are millions of faces and passionate believers who shape and shift their beliefs based on his comments, that are going to be coming to your town halls, that are going to be calling in, that are going to be sending letters, that are going to be sending emails. And I think that's represented as more of a threat to Republican politicians. I think it's easy for them to see even tens of thousands of people at a protest as just kind of one large ambiguous glob. That's how they think about it, I'm pretty sure. But a podcast like Joe Rogan's, where you've got close-ups of the person talking, and you know how many people they're impacting, I just think that's a totally different situation. And it's one that most people, I think, would recognize as having had a major impact in the 2024 election, as I said in the beginning. And with the comment that he has already made, and he ended his phrase with, I think he said it at least 2 times in a row, and maybe 3, speaking about skipping due process, he said that's dangerous, very dangerous. That comment is still echoing. Put your hand to your ear and listen. You can still hear Rogan's comments. That's very dangerous to our country. Believe me, Donald Trump hears that, and that will echo through Trump's head even as he tries to sleep but fails because he realizes he just lost Joe Rogan. Now, will Trump do the typical Trump thing? And realizing he's lost Joe Rogan, will he then go on the attack? Will he seek to destroy him, as has so often been the case? I don't see how he doesn't do that. That's what we need him to do. And even if he knows it's what we need him to do and that we want him to do it, Donald's maladies are such that he, even knowing that, he cannot help himself. He cannot override that innate urge to seek revenge and to lash out. And so if Trump follows Trump in this situation, the nation is about to get an even bigger boost towards the preservation of democracy via Joe Rogan. I truly believe that. And I think that anyone who has been part of that ride, along with the interplay between Trump and Rogan and the influence each has played in each other's lives, I think anybody would be willing to admit that it is significant. And today was significant when the story broke that Rogan said what he said about Trump skipping due process and just saying, you know what? We don't have time for all of that. We don't have time to let everybody have their trial. It would take at least 200 years. I don't know who did Trump's math, but I'm pretty comfortable that math is incorrect. That is Trump math. So let's be watching for, in the next 24 to 48 hours, let's be watching for Trump to lash out, and to lash out hard. And I was on the road today, but as I was coming home, I did catch a little shred of something about that Trump had posted, although he didn't name anybody and he didn't address that situation specifically, but it sounded as though he was referencing it. I'm not sure that he was even aware of Rogan's comments at the time that he made that post. I think the proof will be in the pudding. Once we see, loser Joe Rogan with with the worst podcast in the world, we'll know that he's been face to face with what Rogan has said. So with that, I'll wrap it up. But if you weren't aware of the situation with Rogan and him speaking out, and with him, at least contextually in this situation, making a break with Trump and calling it what it is, incredibly dangerous, just know that happened. And just know that there's more to come. There's more to follow. This is not just going to be swept under the rug. Of that, I am confident. And if it plays out like most of us think it will, that's good for democracy. This is Jack Hopkins, and I will talk to you again soon.